Hey, once again, welcome everybody who's live streaming. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes when Will gets here. My name's Alex. I'm here in the chat to answer questions or chat about whatever's on your mind. So thanks for being here and hang tight. We'll get started in the next few minutes.
Hello, hello. It's the most wonderful time of the year when we gather for getting hired in the era of high interest rates. How about that? Although, supposedly, tomorrow morning, Jerome Powell will gather together some, I don't know, experts and make a call on whether or not to lower interest rates by 1 or 2 quarter percent. Folk, there's nobody with camera on. That's most distressing. If you want to, let's make sure the chat is open. We have my wonderful co-host Alex. I'm very grateful for. Alex is a brilliant mentor in the Codesmith community, seasoned engineer. People in the Codesmith community used to do this. Whenever you talked about a seasoned engineer, that's the seasoning. They did it better than me. There you go. Seasoned engineer. That's Alex. Previously worked at a drone engineering firm. I had to do a little recording today talking about our AI ML additions to the software engineering program, which I've loved building a bunch of myself, the neural networks pieces. Obviously, a lot of it was developed by the co-founder of Codesmith, who's a prominent deep learning academic researcher, author. But also I love to build some of that stuff myself. But shoot, I'm quite tired, I should say, because I just went off my track there. What was I going to say there? I don't know. But anyway, all to say, lovely to see people. We are, yes, gathering to talk how to get hired, strategies. We'll talk what is it to be a compelling engineer in this era? What is it? Where can you do it? Why would you do it? It's not like it's a money grows on trees thing, but it's a wonderfully rewarding in many, many ways career. I did see the end of the Tech Bro video. Well, that's not what you are all hopefully pursuing, which was maybe a little bit of some of that opportunism thing, which is understandable. We all want to look after ourselves, but the wonderful thing about software engineering is that fulfillment that comes from building, problem solving, and doing so with hopefully relatively good impact for society. So we'll talk about why would you do it, and then we'll talk about how can you get paid to do it, because that is a part of the sustainable. It is wonderful. Many software engineers are former musicians, and I would say software engineering has analogous elements, and I'm pretty sure if it were that being a musician could also be similarly sustainable and a career path, which it can be, but obviously not with perhaps the same reliability as software engineering, I think we perhaps consider that. But as it is, software engineering is that rare place where you can have that sustainability, but also that creative problem-solving fulfillment. But I'm almost concerned the chat is closed. It's definitely not, so I do not know what is going on with folk in the chat. I want to hear people in the chat. Maybe you've already answered this for Alex. Thank you, Thea. That's a lovely name. I want to hear, where are you at in the world, and how did you hear about this workshop and it's the least you can do for a free workshop. My God. It's the least you can do. And somebody, please come on camera. Otherwise, I literally don't even know if this is a real audience. Let's see. None of you. Thank you, Chenda. Hello, David. You've been on this before. Maybe you haven't actually, David. Well, anyway, it's lovely to see you. Mehul. Yeah, okay. I saw you for 1 second. Mehul, it's lovely to. Is it Mehul? Oh no, Mehul. Oh no, you're just
Yeah,
saying
it's Mehul. Mehul.
Mehul. Welcome, Mehul. Thank you. Kevin, go on. What's up? What are you going to say?
Uh, I would say I'm over watching you from America. I just come over here. I found this meeting on Meetup.com.
Nice.
So I was struggling finding jobs because the economy and all those things. And I was thinking to myself, well, Well, I might as well just come over here to see what you're going to talk about and
Yeah.
see if it could work for me.
Well, that's Kevin. That's wonderful to have you on, and thank you
Yeah.
for speaking up as well. That's really, really lovely. So thank you, Kevin. Cheers, appreciate it. We'll
Yeah.
start putting your questions, Kevin, if you don't mind, in the chat. Start, please. Don't think your questions only apply to you. If you can write in the chat over the next few minutes or whatever, maybe some of the things that you want to, maybe you've been struggling with, and we'll make sure that we hit those topics. Okay. Sweet. Cheers, Kevin. All right. Oops, I clicked the wrong button. Okay. So thank you everybody. What Chender in Boston, Fab Meetup, Josh in Meetup, Angelica LA, Victor LBC, as they say, David's in Cortland. No, Cortland from Brooklyn. Cortland? Is that a place? Kevin,
Yeah.
I've got to mute
Yeah.
you. You can't be chit-chatting. David, is Cortland a place? Yes?
I'm Cortland. I'm a person. I'm from Brooklyn.
Ah, so you're David Cortland.
Oh, I'm in as David. Oh, that's unfortunate. I must be logged in on the wrong Zoom.
Cool. Anyway, welcome, Cortland.
Apologies. Thank
No,
you.
no. That's fab. Cortland's a lovely name. David's a good name as well. That's my partner's birth name. How about that? There you go. You're not saying something, are you? Anyway, one, excellent. Guatemala, friend of Mars, love it. Thea, great meetup. Lots of meetup folk. Annabelle, CSX, fab. Meetup. Welcome, James from Lagos in Nigeria. Yeah, lovely. Wow, Mehul, San Jose, Bay Area, fab, all over the world. And Alfina is in London, which actually is where I am right now, although I'm normally in the US. But I'm here to hang out with my most most delightful of my best friend. My best friend, here he is. There's my best friend. There you go. Isn't he the cutest? One has to hang out with one's nephew. All right, but no more of that. Let's dive it in. Oh, nice. Wow. So we're basing these insights, folk, off. So this talk, I guess, is quote sponsored by Codesmith, which is a software engineering ML AI immersive type program. So obviously the market with high interest rates, and we'll talk about this, has been less than ideal, but we're basing the insights off, I think, pretty good foundations. So these are our latest offers. We report our offers to this body called SIR, Council on Integrity and Results Reporting, that has all sorts of stringent requirements to include every graduate, all these sorts of things. And so the last report, they do a census. They require you to deep dive on every single candidate, make sure nobody is missed for the graduating period of 2022 through job search in 2023, first year job search. And so those are the stats from there. But obviously that's a while ago. So you could say, I think things have evolved since then. And we actually get great insight from alumni. Shout out to people like Alexa Nunez, who have lived it. She got a great job at iHeart. Well, I shouldn't be naming people, but great people like Alexa who are out there and graduated during what inevitably has been a harder job search period, right, as a software engineer, for sure. But one in which still graduates are achieving great things. And so I hope from this you can see, firstly, the doom and gloom that you do hear in general in online certainly is not coming from nowhere. By no means is this the hot market of old, but what we're going to base this on is, I hope, a degree of evidenced insight. So in that 6-month period or 5-month period, whatever it is, a solid 160 offers, and then these kind of key increases in salary, right? And then offers that hopefully many of you would feel are on average decent steps for you into your career. So yeah, Ismail was a New York-based grad. Donald, I believe, is from West Coast of US. So yeah, all to say, like, we're building this on some good foundations, I hope. And yeah, let's jump into the how to get hired workshop. Yeah, the foundations I hope are well, I think they are quite good to build on for all of you, but I'm going to lay out the secrets are not per se entirely secrets. It's a process that I think all of you can accomplish. So that's we can maybe spend 3 minutes from me max on Codesmith. So it's all about the flexible modern software engineer. So you don't come out as a JavaScript technician. You come out as a software engineer who can, as actually over half of graduates do, work in fields in programming language other than JavaScript. So, you might be like, well, I need a job search in the language that I learned. Hopefully, if you've learned the foundations and principles of being a software engineer, that's secondary, but we'll come to that. So, building this flexible engineer involves building your capacities. These are the engine of your growth. So problem solving, technical communication, the ability to solve difficult engineering challenges, communicate how you're doing it, use underlying principles of engineering to do so, and then bring others along on that journey by being an empathetic partner. All of these will continue to drive your knowledge of coding, which is something that will always have to change, especially right now when we have a ton of evolution in the space. So that's what we look for in candidates. If any of you are aspiring for the program or interested in the program, I would suggest, reaching out to Alex, perhaps, who is an alum, and or just going to other workshops. The program works because of the things that it's designed to. The sort of three pillars it's built on. One is a teaching style that's designed to give you the capacity to learn any new thing for the rest of your career. It's a bit silly of us. It's like, learn how to learn. And that can be a bit confusing for people. They're like, no, I came here to learn programming. Well, no, you come here to learn how to learn so that you can learn any new programming language, any new tool in the future. But you might as well learn how to learn with the most useful contemporary tech. And then do so surrounded by, well, actually, maybe let me explain this. Learning how to learn is really hard. It's really exhausting. It means hitting lots of blocks and being constantly held accountable for explaining what you're doing. It's really exhausting. You need a community of people who are similarly committed around you to doing that in a way that's not about winning, but maybe winning together. So the pedagogy, as I say, is about capacities that drive lifelong growth, but you're going to do it with a contemporary technology, particularly here's the co-founder of Codesmith, who contributed to the ML AI part of the curriculum. And then with a community of people from both, even the top major of Codesmith is computer science, but like a real range of backgrounds, which is kind of cool. And that generates these awesome engineers. And we're going to talk about this, the growth of engineer and engineer adjacent roles, things like this role here. And it's fantastic. I heard a quote on the podcast. I heard an ad on the podcast I listened to 2 weeks ago from Thomson Reuters talking about their new legal AI software, and their kind of tagline is something like, the people who build your AI matter, like the people who design the AI matter. Like, do they understand the engineering and the knowledge areas? And it's like, this person here, she was a grad of Columbia Law School in New York, then became a civil rights fellow at a law firm, then did Codesmith, and then took a job which required 2 years of programming experience and also having been a lawyer. So you're increasingly seeing this the rise of AI is the rise of new and even greater number of domains, problem areas, things you can build where you can use software to solve them. Things that previously couldn't be used, you can use software, like legal tech. Like previously, yeah, you can have legal tech and you can give, some law software, like maybe you can have like I don't know, like a program that puts documents in folders. I don't know. But you could not have an app, a program that gave any degree of nuanced legal advice. It's too, what I'd call, stochastic. That means there's probabilities and uncertainties about the advice. And human language is stochastic. It involves, I always have to say this, it involves refrigerator. I think that might be that's a linguistic joke. It involves probabilities. The probability of me using the word refrigerator next is very, very low, but it's still a probabilistic possibility. That's the evolution of, or that's the limit of traditional software. It cannot problem solve. It cannot solve things involving nuance, subtlety, probability, and uncertainty. AI ML oriented software absolutely can. That's the nature of ChatGPT. It's dealing with probability, which is a perfect way of thinking about human language use. I might use refrigerator next, but probably I'm not going to use refrigerator. That mirrors how legal advice should be. It is nuanced and uncertain. And your possible set of solutions for that previously did not really include software. Now it does. The question is, does one want to be the builder of that or the user? I think that's the essence. That's why I love seeing grads like, I won't name people at the moment, but like it's great New York grad here, in that she said, I'm going to be a lawyer and a builder. Anyway, so that's all to say, lots of prep material, but let me just introduce myself. This is me. There's my wonderful nephew a year ago or so, my best friend, my best buddy. And I'll pass to Alex just for a quick hello before we then dive into 4 areas in how to get hired. We're going to cover, if we're saying how to get hired as a software engineer, let's first define it. What is a great software engineer in this era? Well, we're going to emphasize at its core, it is your ability to solve hard engineering challenges and your ability to communicate how you solve them. I call that problem solving, PS, and technical communication. They may sound like soft skills. They are far, far from it. They are absolutely technically demanding hard skills. So then where can you do it? Well, one of the big evolutions in the last couple of years is that it is no longer as clear that there is a delineation in the quality of an engineering role at an Amazon or at a Walmart. That's wild to think 5 years ago. Now it's not. There's no longer a clear delineation between a software engineering role at a Meta or Instagram and or at a Disney. That's, again, wild to think 5 years ago. But that's because of the growth of engineering mature culture in most firms. It's a recognition of the capital ones. If we are to win, we have to do so with a product-oriented mindset, of course, but with an engineering core. And that is a huge shift. And you see that it's a lot of what I'd call dogs that didn't bark. If you haven't heard this phrase, it's a phrase from, isn't it a phrase from like a Sherlock Holmes story? And it's the things that you don't see because steps were taken to make sure it didn't happen. So we've witnessed in the last 3 months, Sonos have a complete and utter mess up, right, with their app. That used to happen all the time, remember, right? Like that should happen all the time. Now it doesn't happen because more and more companies recognize you must, at your core, have exceptional engineering and product development processes. That was a case of not having that, but it really doesn't happen so much now. But it's more because more and more teams recognize that centrality of quality software engineering. Awesome. Okay, so then why would you do it? And then we'll spend half of our time today saying, how do you get paid to do it? And it's all very well saying what makes a great engineer is great ability to solve engineering problems. But like, how the heck do you show that? Well, that's what we want to focus on for at least half of this talk, is how do you show somebody you have legitimate experience with solving difficult engineering problems and explaining to others how you did so. Actually, that's wonderfully liberating, folk. That is not, I must have X years of experience with, I don't know, Ember.js. It's not that. It's, can you show them you have experience solving engineering problems of the kind that they consider legitimate, so that they can trust that when they delegate those engineering problems to you, you will do it well. Can you explain how you're doing it so that they can trust that you're going to do it well with others in the team, and that they can trust that you will make the right decisions? Because if they can't trust your explaining ability, they can't trust that you'll make the right calls. So before we dive into all of that, let's say hello to Alex. I will just mute myself so that Alex can say hello, and I will turn my volume down. So give me a wave, Alex, when you're done, so you can give the cold, unvarnished truth about Codesmith.
Here comes the cold, unvarnished truth. Hey, everybody, my name's Alex. I graduated from Codesmith in close to the end of 2022. So straight into the lovely job market we still see today. I came from a totally non-technical background, and since then I found myself working in the drone space. So now I'm the UX engineering director for a drone company. We build drones to fly sub-canopy for forest fire mapping and planning and so forth. So all that is to say, I'm just here to answer questions in the chat and hang out. I put my contact information in the Zoom chat. Reach out to me if you have questions about the program, questions about the job market, whatever's on your mind. I'm happy to talk about it. And also, like Will said, all this stuff, none of this stuff is secret, but it works. So, pay attention, take the advice, good advice, and I hope to see you all in the chat. Take care.
Yay! Thank you, Alex. I am muted. People, if you're interested in connecting, with me on LinkedIn, there it is. Certainly feel free to send me messages. If anything you don't feel comfortable asking questions about comes up for you, please send it there on LinkedIn. You can also DM me on Twitter. Again, if anything comes up that you don't feel comfortable raising. Oh, by the way, we've got the chat open again, which is great. If anybody comes on and starts messaging you saying unpleasant things or odd things, please do DM me immediately, because we used to, at least until a few months ago, have some problems with that. Seems to have died down again now, but let us know if you do hear anything, if anyone messages you some unpleasant stuff. All right, let's go. So it's part one. What makes a great software engineer at this point? I won't dwell too long on this, but I really, really think it's important for you to know, because you're going to hear a bunch of stuff out there that says, hey, I've got 7 years of engineering experience and I cannot find a job. Or even as Kyle Simpson, a prominent JavaScript developer or leader, has talked about the struggle he's been having finding a role. How the heck do I find a role? One might be thinking. Well, for one thing, it's recognizing what actually makes a great engineer might not always be what the loudest people on, obviously particularly Reddit, but elsewhere, Twitter, whatever, X, whatever, might be saying they have. It's quite easy to think that if someone is loud online, that they have all the insights on what makes a great engineer, especially if they have many years of experience. And they might do, but they might not. And so let's first define what actually makes a great engineer, especially in this era where kind of bits of code can be generated by your ChatGPT and your Copilot like that. So what the heck makes a great engineer in that era? Well, let's at least first get a map of the tools, technology, and languages that are high value in this era. What is the stack? The stack is the collection of tools. What is the stack that is high value right now? Well, you've got your front end, what you see on the screen, your back end, where it comes from, your infrastructure, how you get it online, your developer tooling, how you as developers write it to get it online, your ML adjacent, or I'm going to call it like, I like to call it prediction actually, or stochastic software, but let's call it, I don't know, MLAI probably is fine, isn't it? And then your kind of separate is your programming language. Okay, there we go. So that top 5 is the modern software engineer stack. Stack, as I say, full stack engineer works on the front end, the back end, and the stack is the almost like kind of list, the pile of technologies that you use in each bit typically. So front end is, as I say, what you see. So it's displaying pixels on the page representing state, that is data capturing all the information about your app. So in this current Google Slides doc, the state of all of the stuff here on this page, you see when my cursor is moving, is unselected. Now, the state of this box here is selected. But you can also see that that state has been displayed in pixels because it's got a little blue box around it. So you want to make sure that the state, the truth, in this case, that bit is selected and what the user sees are in sync. And it turns out that in a complex application, doing that is the only thing you have to do in the front end, but also the most profoundly hard thing you can possibly imagine. Because firstly, they're separate things. It may look as though the highlightedness is the state, is the truth, but it's just pixels. Under the hood, in this app, on the front end, must be somewhere box, I don't know, color blue, state, highlighted, now true, now false, now true, now false. And that can be changed from the user here. That can be changed by many, many other interactions in this UI, this user interface, the place where the user can interact with your application. That's the heart of front end. The tools around it are HTML, CSS. Actually, a lot of the JavaScript is more the web browser, not the JavaScript. And then a ton of frameworks, React, Vue, Bun, Next, all of which are trying to make that process of building in the browser easier for developers. Web systems, I guess, is the well, that's a bit of a weird connection here. I don't know why I quite put these separately. I'd probably put these I don't know, browser environment anyway. But this is the glue between, at least in the case of HTTP, between what you see and where that comes from, because you don't load your computer up and it automatically has Google Slides, it automatically has Twitter. It's coming from somewhere. It's coming from computers connected to the internet, known as servers, and ones that have lots of data stored on them, but are regular computers, known as databases. There's a range of technologies for these. Certainly you would want to probably focus, and we'll talk about that in a second, but whether you use Node or Java or Golang or Rust, or you're going to be flexible to those. But these are the server runtimes or frameworks, Django, and there's also other ways of storing your data, whether you use a Redis or a Postgres. These are SQL, well, Postgres is a SQL database. That's the SQL there. That's the type of storage structure where you can use a structured query language to go and get data from it in a very predictable manner. And people become absolutely gifted at using this, how do you call it, a programming language? It's not really a programming language, this querying language. This language allows you to go and search a database. Okay. Infrastructure is how do you get all of this, all these applications onto the internet? How do you ensure if you're running X, still sorry to call it that, but if you're running X, or you're running Instagram, or you're running Spotify, or you're running a deployed drone or robotics, how do you get that code onto the internet so that when a user goes on X, but also so do another 15,000 users in that second, that it's not being provided, the user isn't being provided the web page of X from one computer, but is being provided that from as many computers as needed to send the web pages quickly to all those users at once in parallel. Doing so is going to require having that code of that user's page across many computers potentially, or across one computer, but many that can go and look up on that single computer the tweets of that given user. That's going to require deploying your code to lots of computers and then ensuring that they all work together well. That is where infrastructure comes in, whether it's hosted by Amazon or Google or Microsoft, so Azure, AWS, Google Cloud Platform, or Azure for Microsoft, but it's also how do you join the dots up between all those different machines. Maybe you're using Kubernetes, maybe you're ensuring that the application and all of the surrounding important stuff that it needs to run is packaged up in what's called a container. My point here is just, this is the other big part of the stack. And then developer tooling is trying to minimize the bottleneck in engineering. The ultimate bottleneck, and if their bottleneck could be reduced a bit, companies would produce so much more product. The ultimate bottleneck is software engineers. They cannot get enough output per software engineer, which is why if you can speed up and improve output per software engineer, the number of features you can build goes up enormously. The amount of stuff you can write goes up enormously. And that's developer tooling, which I'd also add in here, of course, in theory, co-pilots, but even potentially agent tools. That's the stuff that makes you more productive. And then finally, it's been around for a bit, but my goodness, now is it a core part of the stack? It's prediction. And prediction is the AI ML stuff that allows your app to do things that are, as I said, probabilistic. And that might be enabling DoorDash to auto refund when you request the food didn't show up, using an ML model or a machine learned model to determine whether or not to give you an automatic refund or not. Or it might be predicting the best audio track that corresponds to the prompt you wrote saying, hey, I want a reggaeton version of, I don't know, a song about the day you spent in London with your nephew. And then predicting the audio, I don't know, pixels, digital audio file that corresponds to that. That's not just deploying code online. That's not just having backend code. That is specific first principles and the specific technologies that represent capturing probability, prediction, uncertainty in your app. It's making sure that the model is deployed, and it's how you design the inference endpoint for that model. It's designing the right user experience where there's now an automated decision on whether you're going to get a refund. There better be a good product experience around that, including the possibility of appealing the decision. Building out that user experience is a big part of this as a software engineer. And then it's things like thinking about the data pipeline. So Apple's new proofreading feature in its Apple Intelligence AI offering, its new proofreading feature, will constantly improve because as you get the proofread version back by clicking proofread and it's sending to the model, hey, take this not good text and make it better, the user's then going to edit it. That's new data to improve the model in the future. The software engineer who's properly working now as a full stack engineer is thinking about that and helping design the data pipeline, which is that new data to improve the model in future and funneling it back to a server to ultimately the data scientist to refine the model. So these are the pieces of the modern full stack engineer. And then, of course, a programming language. So the point of this is to say, if you want to be a full stack engineer, it's owning these areas, it's being selective on what you dive deep in, and it's having a good map of how all these pieces join together. You can do that through, you could take this list here and get going in ChatGPT, asking good questions. You want to be T-shaped, which is the term meaning across the top of the T, you have a solid map of all these areas. Maybe you've got a bit of a sense of view, VUE. Maybe you've got a bit of a sense of S3 in AWS. Maybe you've got a bit of a sense of, I don't know, non-generic examples. Oh, I don't know, GraphQL. You've got a bit of a sense. But then you have some areas where you're really, really deep in your knowledge. So I love the idea, by the way, that can be quirky stuff or like really obvious stuff. Like you can become really deep in infrastructure on S3. S3 is not much more than an online file storage like Dropbox. And yet it has all sorts of fascinating, interesting implementations and edge cases, whatever. If you want to be a T-shaped developer, you might choose your STEM to be knowing the ins and outs of S3 as an AWS feature that no one else knows, except maybe the, people super invested in, like the creators. And there's some great videos about it that allow you to go really, really deep. The reason you do that is when you're communicating, well, first, it makes a great team member. I'm going to take a breath for a second, sorry. Firstly, it makes a great team member. A great team is a collection of T-shaped people. You want to have everyone's got a good map, can make good judgment calls across the board. But oh, damn, go talk to them for the expert insight on that bit. Go talk to them for the expert. It's also going to turn out to be really important when you're trying to get someone to pay you for engineering, because you can't show them you're an expert in everything. You won't be anyway, but you can't even show them you're good in everything. You can't actually show them easily this top of the T because there's no time to cover all of it. So instead, you can almost show them it's like if you saw a mountain, it's very, very unlikely that there's not a mountain range around it. Right? Like it's like if you've got lots of depth in one thing, it's very unlikely that you're not solid in other areas. So it's a good interpretation by somebody who's interviewing you to go, well, they're really good at, like, really expert in S3. It's kind of unlikely they're expert in S3 and don't know anything else about infrastructure. So it's a really powerful way when you're interviewing to quickly show if you're an authority in one area, a very powerful way to show them you are able to be an authority in something, good sign, you could learn something else just as deep, but B, that probably you're quite decent across the board. I ain't got time to ask you about all of it, but I can see you're really deep in this, and I can kind of infer the shape of the rest of your knowledge. It's not like you don't probably just literally have like this. It's probably more like this. Right, so all this said, as I said, over half of Codesmith graduates in the last 500 offers didn't take jobs that were even in JavaScript, TypeScript, the main programming language they learn. Let alone didn't take jobs in React, the main UI framework they learn, because it's not really about the given framework. It's not even really about the language you learn. At least as important is, this was the old stat, 40% of Codesmith is 50%. This was the old stat before we put the last 500. If at least as important as the tools you choose are the underlying principles of engineering. One area is the principles of code running. What happens when code runs? I would really recommend going to this set of workshops here around the principles of how code runs. What is happening when in programming? Same thing for neural networks and same thing for large language models. So these are free workshops every week. So go look those up and just start getting those principles of how code runs, how models work. And then it's the architectural and design decisions, so things like encapsulation. Once you start to know how code runs, this derives quite quickly. So encapsulation, you've done a computer science degree, I'm sure many of you have. You might be like, oh yeah, I kind of know what that is, but I'm not really sure why I care. What's really cool is once you know the fundamental principles of a runtime or of programming, you start to go, it's much easier to work out why you might want to wrap up some of that data and functionality in a way that makes it less accessible and easy to break for others. And then tied to that are the principles of writing code that is easy for others to work with, your code quality, dry, meaning don't repeat yourself, and then doing so at a scale or performance ready to scale. So these are just as important, folk, as being knowledgeable about given frameworks and tools. And finally, I would even argue that your engineering approach and principles and your knowledge, programming language, tools, whatever, is still only as useful as how good you are at solving difficult engineering problems. Can you break down a difficult engineering problem, and can you explain how you've done it to others? And people, this is a practice thing. And having interviewed hundreds, if not thousands, of software engineering candidates or technical adjacent candidates with many, many years experience, often all you want to know when you're hiring is, I have an as yet undefined set of engineering challenges. Even as the engineering manager, even as the CTO, even as principal engineer, I don't understand all of them, let alone as the recruiter, let alone as the product lead. I don't understand all of them, but I need somebody who can show me that they have experience solving relatively adjacent or similar, but also I don't desperately care. I care that they've solved hard engineering problems and that they can ensure that I trust them to do so. And the trust them to do so bit is going to turn out to be a combination of, can you explain to me how you're doing it? Not BS, not try and hide what you're doing. Oh. Not try and hide what you're doing. Not try and convince me that you I don't know, not try and not have solved the problem before necessarily, but that you will break down the problem and put the work into explaining to me how you've done it, putting it in terms for me, but also putting it in terms for the principal engineer, who's an authority on that bit, because in the end, you are going to be the expert on your bit of the code base being the posh word for collection of the code of the app. And there was a great session I was really lucky to do with Brandy, who went to Codesmith about 4 years ago, and she was a senior engineer at Microsoft, and she's now at Google. And she's just like, every single thing is about how well you explain the choices you're making. Why are you doing this? And that is a highly practiced thing, people. How do you practice it? Well, obviously, you can do it through Codesmith, but also you can do it via launching an engineering blog and explaining all the decisions you make every day. You can explain it by having a buddy, a friend, who you partner with every day and talk through your code and your choices to them. You can explain it by explaining to ChatGPT what you think is going on and say, hey, can you give me feedback on how I'm explaining this? To be honest, to some extent, ChatGPT can provide enormous value guiding you. The reason you do Codesmith is really to be forced to do it. Because while ChatGPT can be engaging enough to really keep going, we all need often to kind of have pressure and a structured environment and a sensitive environment to keep pushing through the hard challenge that is explaining and understanding what we're doing. But if you're able to motivate yourself to do that through, let's say, ChatGPT, which some people can, is enormously valuable to grow in your ability to communicate difficult engineering ideas. Okay, that's what makes a great engineer. You need real experience with each of these areas: problem solving, technical communication, engineering approach and principles, its best practices, how it's working under the hood. Non-technical communication, we didn't dwell on this one, but it's, are you a thoughtful, kind, constructive team member? And finally, your knowledge of the tools and technology, which is always going to be changing. The bit that doesn't change is the principles, the underlying principles of how code runs. What is it to be? What is software engineering? And what definitely doesn't change are these two. Actually, the reason we've expanded the program, the software engineering immersive, to be software engineering ML AI immersive, is that actually there are some principles and mental models you need to deal as a full stack engineer with prediction, with ML AI. You do need to have some strong foundational mental models in the notion of sampling and generalization, in the notion of capturing complex meaning in data. Those are mental models that are not actually really part of the software engineering as is mental framework. So you had to add those pieces. But really, these are pretty permanent. This is obviously permanent. This is always changing. So you need experience in all of these. I do particularly think that showing experience in these two, showing it in interview, is the way to get hired. Because not only does it make you a good engineer, it's also great evidence when you're being interviewed for the other thing that they care about as much as how good are you. This is all how good are you. All this stuff is how good are you. As much as they care about that, people, they care equally about how much are you going to bring, how good you are to solve their, how much energy from that. Like you can be the best engineer in the world, and if you're not going to like bring it to their problems, it's only half done. They need to see your dedication and care to solve their problems. Now, you might be like, well, hey, I'm a brilliant engineer. You don't need to, I don't need to prove that. Well, in this market, you do. In this market, they have cherry pick the ability to, they can cherry pick people who really care and are going to really try and be really good. You need to show that you really care as well as you're really good. And I don't know any better way of showing you really care than having experience doing these top two things because they're really hard. If you speak to your experience in React and you know what you know, it's like, okay, great, you might be a really good engineer. But what I can't tell from that is, are you somebody who cares? If you have done some amazing problem solving that you can describe, oh, we worked through this difficult engineering challenge where we built out to solve this difficult problem, then that's evidence of your care. If you've got experience of explaining difficult stuff with empathy and dedication to others, that's evidence you care, that you're going to try. So these top two are not only good for making you a great engineer, they're also really good for showing the other thing that companies care about, which is that you are going to be a dedicated engineer to their stuff. You're going to care, you're going to try, which in the market, which is not hot, is very important part of getting hired. Okay, the power lies with the company more than it would otherwise. So that's what makes a great engineer. More important than the knowledge is the capacities to solve difficult problems and communicate how you did it and experience doing so. It's why, sorry, I've been talking for like 9 hours. It's why I've always been a bit skeptical of portfolios. You might have been told if you went to a coding boot camp or, you know, come towards the end of your undergraduate degree, whatever, build a portfolio. The problem with portfolios is you're not being hired for a pretty website. You're not even necessarily being hired for code. You're being hired for how you took a potentially undefined engineering problem and intentionally and thoughtfully came up with the best solution and ideally helped others understand how you're doing it. No pretty website can show that. You don't know what the problem was, but not even code can really show that because, again, you don't know what the code was trying to solve. You don't know what the constraints were. What you need is almost case studies. We don't really have case studies in software engineering. We have like engineering blog posts that describe and explain to other people how you would approach it, what you learn from it, and how they can use that knowledge to improve their approach. That's to me the best portfolio. If you were to build a portfolio, but that only for me emphasizes more what makes a great software engineer. It's one who can do that, solve difficult problems and explain it. And that's why when people say, hey, should I build a portfolio? You're like, build a portfolio of engineering blog posts where you talk about interesting engineering decisions and choices you've made. That's what an engineering portfolio looks like. Okay, you can do a personal site as well, but that's not, that's not what you're being hired for. In a way, the rise of the AI stuff has kind of highlighted more than ever before what an engineer is, because you can just, as I'm sure you've seen the videos, where you can just generate a sort of static page or even more dynamic page with a description and prompts. Yeah, but now we know that that's not the special bit, and it never was. The special bit was the understanding what the heck the need was, how to handle all the complex edge cases, and then put it all together. That's what an engineer is. Okay. So now we're going to dive into where can you do it, and then why would you do it. That'll only take a couple of minutes. Before we dive into that, let's hit on some questions that people might have shared. Joshua says, what if you already have computer science degrees? Joshua, do you want to follow up on that question? Is that particularly here? If it's particularly, Joshua, you don't mind following up, like maybe that was asked in context of something and I missed it. Can you just kind of add a bit more to that? As a general note, yeah, so it's quite an open-ended question, but assuming you're asking how would that affect my job search differently? I mean, obviously it's an asset, albeit one in which you still, everything here still applies. If you have a computer science master's, or once you start to get more academic in computer science, there can be a nervousness, particularly then, are you a builder? Or are you a academic research, whatever? And that's where especially writing well, firstly doing some building, go and build some interesting projects that are, user-oriented, user-facing, solving problems that users have, very different sort of computer science studies. It's solving problems users have. Go build projects like that, and then again, write them up, explain how you did them. That's the biggest gap people tend to have with a computer science degree. By computer science degree is not so much, but certainly by masters, is that there's a fear in a hiring company. Yeah, but do you build? Do you solve problems? Or are you an intellectually curious analytic researcher who is more focused on learning than resolving issues? So not true, it's just the perception you're overcoming. Okay. Yeah, Kevin, for sure. Just remember, it's only a piece of the puzzle for getting hired. Hey, is this Nelson? I think.
Yes, it is. I miss
Hey,
you at the hard
Nelson.
part.
This is Chinese man, right?
Yes,
Hey, Nelson. Lovely to see you.
I miss you. Come back to
I
hard
miss
parts.
you. Hello, Nelson. Your username brought back memories. Hey, at least I still remember your name, right? That's I hope makes up for me saying yeah. But it's lovely to see you. Lovely to see you with your ever lovely username as well. But good to hear from you, Nelson. Welcome back. Hope you're doing well. I feel like Atrioc, the streamer. Get off the stream. I don't know if he doesn't say that, but Nelson, good to have you back. Abu, would you recommend adding online course projects to your portfolio? Yeah, but Abu, I hope you heard what I just said there. If you followed a tutorial, did you do any problem solving? Possibly not. So define some additional feature needs for the project. Suppose you did an online tutorial that got you building, maybe it had an ML element and it got you building some sort of classifier, or let's say a proofreading app. Okay, that's a definite like new Hello World or tic-tac-toe type app, would be a proofreading app. Connect an LLM that's going to return refined text of the user's draft. Okay, great. But you followed a tutorial for that. So you didn't actually do what an engineer does, which is take undefined problems and define them and then solve them. So make one. Say, hey, I've got a proofreading app here right now, but I don't want to just be able to proofread. Let me add the ability, think of it as an extension, to select proofread and make it more formal, and then make it an option to make it more humorous or more relaxed. Okay, how would we build that feature? So start mapping it out, maybe recognizing quite quickly that humor is a really bad definition or really hard to define thing with a piece of text. So how the heck would you, and maybe you get a one shot, right? You return humorous text and the user's like, "Ugh." So how would you design your use of the, let's say you're using an OpenAI LLM API, how would you design your interaction with it to not be one shot? Maybe to allow further information to be provided as a part of a prompt. Well, how do you build that out as a user experience for the user who doesn't want to write out detailed, like they can't guess what the options are? So maybe you make it like, make it funnier, and there's three different options: funnier, ha ha, funnier, droll, funnier, what like then you start to design what that is going to imply for your engineering choices. And now you've got a blog post that you can develop there that explains how you think about, I would probably write the blog post honestly, on designing user experiences that determine user experiences that restrict, constrain users' interaction with AIs. Because ultimately, while we all love ChatGPT, the reason usage is, kind of hit and miss. And what you got to say that Apple gets for AI is ChatGPT is truly, the most exceptional breakthrough in 10 years of apps, but it's quite a high friction, right? I was trying to generate a cute picture of me and my nephew going on a London bus. We were around London, but I couldn't quite get this thing wouldn't be in the right place, or that, or this, and frictionless AI usage would not be having to describe and give feedback on how I want my funnier proofread text looking. It would be having it have three options. And so now you've got a blog post that's about, as an engineer, designing the user experience where you're using a OpenAI or some other LLM API in a way that's affordable, because you don't want to be, do you want to run all three of those? Those API calls are expensive, but also you need to build a great user experience. So those are really interesting questions that you can describe in your portfolio, Abu, but that's your portfolio piece, not the picture of the site. That just won't get you hired in this era. Okay, Alfina, I see a hand raised. Just come to 1 second. Yeah, absolutely. Got a question here. No software engineering job experience. Put projects and experience on the resume. Absolutely, but you must describe them. As a DM that I got here, you must describe them not, and we'll talk about this in presentation down here in a moment, in how to get paid for this, but might as well answer it right now. You must describe them in terms of three key bullets, or no, three key sections to each bullet. What, how, why. What did you do? What feature did you build? How did you do it? What tools and technology did you use to solve it? What principles did you use to solve it? What, I encapsulated the data, we implemented, I don't know, rolled back we rolled back some changes that were put in by somebody else in order to solve what problem. And much of the time, the problem you're solving is not, very rarely are you going to improve performance. Maybe, but not always. A lot of the time, your problem solving that you do is going to be making other developers in your team's lives easier. We implemented there you go. We implemented an observer pattern within our custom UI framework to automate UI updates on data changes to reduce state view inconsistencies in UI by, I don't know, whatever percentage, 90%, because there were a lot of them before, and now there's fewer opportunities. There's automatic state updates or whatever like that. What, how, why. Even if your project was, not for a client or not for users, try and think through. Again, this is the person who DM'd me here. Try and think through. I'm assuming if they DM me, they don't want their name mentioned. So try and think through why you use that tool. You might be like, well, I used it because my bloody programming course told me to. Yeah, but go search on ChatGPT. What are the benefits? What's the benefit of using hooks in React versus some other technique for getting your state through the application? Okay. Yeah, Joshua, for sure. Joshua was saying, I got a CS degree from local college. What's your opinion? Yeah, it's all great, but it ain't going to get you a job. You've got to show experience in the things we're talking about. What I will say is this, Joshua, is there may even have been projects you did in class. It's very unlikely in class. Maybe it's extensions. Hey, maybe you did a project in class that you're now going to deploy. And now you have to start dealing with some challenges. Write them up. Write them a blog post. Explain how you made those calls. Okay, we have Asher says, please give an example of what a complex engineering problem looks like. Yeah, absolutely. I was going to actually. I was going to. Too defensive. So Codesmith has lent, or Codesmith alums have lent for many, many years now on the projects they do with this nonprofit that we also sponsor called Open Source Labs. They do projects in conjunction with it that are contributions to the open source community. In the world of software engineering, open source is like the gold standard of challenging but significant engineering. But also, it literally runs. It's the bedrock of all the work we do. We're all building on those shoulders of open source tools. It's an extraordinary, almost unique feature of software engineering landscape. It's really phenomenal. So it's really hard stuff, though, because if you're building an open source library that's trying to improve, let's give a really simple example. Let's say you wanted a very lightweight UI framework that allows you, no, let me do better. Oh, here's a perfect example. In Python, numbers in grids, known as matrices, are, at least within the NumPy library, very popular library in Python, beautifully handled, elegantly handled, easy to work with. It's not that you don't have that in JavaScript, but it's much less typical to have an open source. There's much, less, much fewer frameworks or libraries available. Library is a bunch of pre-written code that you as a developer can just pull in. There's far fewer of those for working with numbers. You could right now go away and build a mini library that enables basic linear algebra. That's working with matrices. Now, there's probably plenty of libraries. There's one called num.js, like NumPy. But maybe you're like, hey, you don't want to have the overhead of that. Let's keep it simple and light. It just lets you do basic matrix algebra. You can go and put that on NPM or put that online, and you've built a library. But no, Asher, you didn't just build that for you. If you were going to do a bunch of math stuff in JavaScript, you might have had to build that for yourself. But you did it so that it is usable by others. You're basically writing code that's sufficiently usable by other engineers that sufficiently clear and well written that other engineers can pick it up without even being on the same team. It's such a sign of a quality engineering problem to have been solved that automatically people interviewing you, other engineers, recruiters, CTOs, they do really regard it. And they regard the open source work. They know that you haven't just solved problems for you, you've solved them at a kind of level of abstraction higher. But, you've enabled others to solve their problems with your tools. So Codesmith alums heavily lean on their open source projects. Doesn't mean you have to do that, though. Obviously, you're encouraged to try that, but it is quite hard without the structure of, the Codesmith an OS Labs community. But if you want to find similar, actually, there's every chance that your project that you did for a family restaurant, for example, or your project that you did for your college, but then you did a bunch of extension stuff. You deployed it online. You turned your, I don't know, simulation that you did within your biochemistry crossover with your CS, I don't know, but you deployed it using Streamlit or something like that. And then you started pushing the boundaries of what it did. You enabled others to enter their own data. And now it's starting to solve problems that you can describe, Asher, in ways that sound really compelling. And we'll talk about this in a moment, how to get paid. But half of the importance of having solved difficult problems is to be able to explain to others quickly, even in an application letter or message, the kind of level of what you've solved. The ability to go, yeah, I've most recently been working on an open source tool that will test GraphQL endpoints. That instantly sounds like a challenging, complex engineering. You put it as this complex engineering problem. That instantly sounds complex. But you might not have done something like that. Don't worry. You can describe. I was recently working on expanding, enabling, or hold on. I think about the specific example. I was recently working on, let's say, for some bioinformatics, deployed or production. Yeah, working on production level bioinformatics dashboards with user and maybe you create an API endpoint for it as well, so that other developers could use it with open API endpoints or with exposed API endpoints, so that other developers could pull in the data from the dashboard, whatever, with clean API endpoints or clean API for other developers to integrate. So I make up a project and trying to describe it, but no excuse. But what you're trying to do there is describe the what, how, why, probably tighter than that for just an example. But what you want to do is find one thing that sounds really hard. And what you definitely don't want to do is, I've worked across a range of projects, or I have built many apps. The problem with that is anyone can say that, but only you can describe the specific detail of the hard problem you solved. So the biggest takeaway, Asher, is get specific on a difficult bit, the hardest bit you did. If you're like, but I've done so many things. Great. Name the hardest and say, among other things, because they're looking at that application, and we're going to come to this in a second. They're looking at that application for 2 seconds. They need to instantly tell this person did something specific. When I see somebody write, have worked on XYZ application, many applications, React 4+ years, the problem is everyone writes that. All I want is a specific short 4 sentence where one of those is describing a specific hard thing they've done recently, because then I know it's real. Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's keep going because many questions. You may have to repose your questions. Okay. So we hit what makes a great engineer. Now, where can you do it? The key thing here is all of these firms now have strong engineering teams. We're even seeing, my God, defense tech emerge as a place where there's extraordinary, of course, there's extraordinary engineering teams at these companies, but software engineering teams were, obviously remarkable, but there was sometimes secondary, or typically secondary, in many of these areas, even engineering heavy areas like automotive or defense, or hardware, networking, whatever, often they were secondary, the software engineering teams, to all the other engineering areas. Software, I don't want to shout out Mark Andreessen because, I don't know. But his famous quote, "It's eating the world," it's only just beginning. It's only just beginning. If you look at defense contractors like Anduril, these are firms that consider themselves to be software firms, despite building physical objects for the military and allies in the US and allies. So everywhere, except that you probably need to be remote or hybrid, unless you're Amazon, which apparently is going fully back in person. But vast majority of Codesmith graduates are remote or hybrid. Some, on site, but you got to go looking. And then in terms of titles, there is a proliferation of software type titles: product engineer, cognitive engineer, AI engineer, analytics engineer, all of which involve software engineering legit. But you're less likely to see front end, back end, like you're more likely to see software engineer, because it's hard to define front end, back end when the front end includes such level of complexity as building Google Slides that has almost all the aspects of a full stack application within the front end. Client-side database, multiple streams of work happening. I mean, run in the runtime. These are the things happening within a modern browser. So can you call that front end? It's not very useful to call it front end. And then the back end, there's so many pieces that might be, dashboards, or it's software engineer as generic. It's increasingly the term, and the flexibility to move around the stack. And then why would you do it? Well, we already hit on it, so I won't dwell too long, but just keep coming back to this. We've got what makes a great engineer, where can you do it, and why would you do it are all key questions to answer to get hired to do it. The why would you do it? Remind yourself and drill down on your motivation. It ain't a gold rush, although it is, of course, still probably the best paid kind of role you can take earlier in one's career, and one where you don't need to have the gatekeeping is less than other fields, although there is still plenty of gatekeeping. But I think coming back to your why is vital. You're working as a role that is at the core of taking today society's challenges and developing the solutions for them, productizing, turning them into products, including AI pieces for them. James Laff, who's one of the team at Codesmith, sent me really a phenomenal piece about someone's ability to speak after ALS being restored using a large language model, or a couple of models, that learned what the sounds they were making are intending to say, and therefore form those into full sentences. Productizing that sort of thing is the software engineer's job. Even the data scientist or the researcher's job is the experiments to build that, but turning that into something that can touch many people's lives is the builder of these tools' job, and that is the software engineer. All while the day-to-day of that is rather challenging and exciting, ongoing problem solving and learning that does not stop. But as I say, the ability to work with the most impactful tools and or lead with them. And that's why I did it. I didn't want to be another talker who hadn't who hadn't done the hard work of being able to build with it. And that for me is a great pleasure. I didn't want to be a person who says, I'm running a tech company, but I can't do it. I can't do the core bit. So whatever your motivation is, hold on to that, especially when you go through the tougher times of the job search, as we know in this high interest rate market is part of the puzzle. Okay, so just because I know I've taken too long for some reason. What makes a great engineer? Where can you do it? Why would you do it? Now let's get paid to do it. To get paid to do it, you need to show, not tell them, that you have, so show them that you have legit, grounded, and real experience in all 5 things that make a great software engineer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But know that these top 2, if you can show it, are especially powerful. You need to show experience with problem solving and technical communication, but all five are the things that make a great software engineer. But you also need to show that you care, that you are dedicated to solving their problems at every stage of application. In the final round, in theory, hopefully, your energy will come through, your effort will show that you definitely care. Like, I can't say that for sure. I know that Codesmith grads, it does. The conversion rates for Codesmith grads for the final round are, I believe, about 50%, 45, 50%. That's, very high. And that's because ultimately, if you are a high passion and quality engineer, the on-sites, it's not completely within your control, and you get this very unlucky thing where you can be an amazing candidate, but someone else is slightly more of a fit, and you could say, well, I could have been better. For any other day, you might have been the best. So there's a bit of, but ultimately, you can really show all these things in a final round. The worst bit, people, is the application stage. The application stage where not only, I mean, technically, probably it's helpful per person, but if everyone starts doing it, automating their applications, things like this, it is a crowded, borderline mess, the application stage. And you have to navigate that. And actually, what's funny is if you can show them at the application stage the experience you have with solving difficult engineering problems and your ability to communicate them, and as important, absolutely as important, that you are genuinely, sincerely committed to bringing all that talent you have to solving their problems, then you will stand out in the crowd of applications. And they're desperate for it, having posted enough of these roles. Every time they post a role, they get like a subset of them are bots. Subset of them are bot, meaning somebody who's not authentically who they are claiming to be. So it might be a recruiter sending a resume through as though they are an applicant, and then they say, hey, actually, that's quite good. And the applicant turns out to be like a recruiter saying, so sorry, this candidate doesn't exist anymore, but how about this candidate? Or the percentage of people who kind of are sending so many applications, they're not really actually putting investment in, and a recruiter, a hiring company, they're at risk that they do respond, the person doesn't even respond back. And you might be like, well, of course I would respond back. Just give me a shot. But actually, a percentage of people won't. Because if it is such low effort to apply, then actually, in a good chunk of cases, the people who've applied with that low effort application are not actually invested and therefore don't actually respond. And companies know that. So they're desperate when you apply to see some evidence that you're a legit candidate, that you're quality, and some evidence that you're essentially real and somewhat already care about them enough that it's going to be worth them responding to you and that you'll even respond back. You may be like, well, of course I respond back, but a percentage won't. And they can tell they're good at discerning, or maybe they're bad at it, but they can tell if they can't see effort from you, they reasonably think, should I put effort back? Because they may not even respond. So you've got to somehow, when you apply, show experience and dedication, all while doing it efficiently, because you've got to do enough applications where the conversion is so low, because it's just, you may not even have your application seat. There's ATSs, these are things that do some degree of first screen. Those are navigable. There's good tools that allow you to adjust and make sure, you don't want to have perfect ATS passing, you don't need it, but it can come at the expense of the human readability. But, these ATSs that allow you to, ATS testing tools allow you to assess, making sure your resume is decent enough are good. Okay, so let's dive in then to how you can get paid. So take a look at this. You've got to cross the chasm. You've got to ensure that the reality is matched by the perception. So I've got 3 levels here, back of the envelope, junior, mid, and senior software engineer. So junior software engineer can solve problems they've seen before with tools they've used before. Mid-level is your kind of classic software engineer. Solve problems they've not seen before with tools they've not used before. They, of course, require mentorship, but less, much, much less than the can only solve problems they've seen before with tools they've used before. And all of these things are a spectrum. Senior engineer is able to enable others to solve problems that they haven't seen before with tools they haven't used before. They are the empowerer of others. So out of Codesmith, you can see roughly the same number of people get senior as junior, and then the bulk of people get this autonomous, can solve any new problem reasonably well, software engineer. So I gave this as a sort of anecdote in some front-end masters talk. You saw some people mentioning front-end masters, and they've shared it as a little clip on LinkedIn and Twitter, other places. And I always look to see who reposts it, who likes it, whatever, because it matters to me that this continues to be something that lead engineers, CTOs, principal engineers echo and repost when I say it, because it's so important, because it's so easy to think that what makes you a good software engineer and a mid-level software engineer must be years of experience, must be how much you know. And therefore, at a Codesmith, for example, the fact that a bunch of people are getting mid-level roles must be some problematic thing, as opposed to, as I'm always it matters to me so much that I see other people echoing this, as opposed to what I've seen in a fantastic post on either Hacker News or Reddit from an IC, that's an individual contributor at Meta, who had 7 or 8 years experience when asked what defines a mid-level engineer. They responded, I've seen people with 10 years experience who are not yet. And I've seen people who have under 6 months who already are. The definition is autonomy. Can they take problems and work out how to solve them where they haven't seen how to before? It's crucial. It should be liberating for all of you. The problem is, it's a hell of a lot easier to communicate that you have that through shortcuts like look at the number of years experience I have on the paper. That'll get you through the first round. It won't get you through the on-site or the phone screen if you can't do it. But what about when you don't have those years of experience on paper? You need to show directly the quality of your experience. And even if you do, you still need to do this, because actually, that's the wrong framing. At this point, when someone applies with 4+ years experience for some given technology, you're just like, because you just aren't hiring for that. Everyone has some number, and anyone can say some number. And you're not hiring for that. You're hiring for, I have a set of problems that you haven't seen before. How can you convince me in your application that you are flexible to solving difficult problems? And saying I have 4+ years of given technology experience, it's like, yeah, you and everyone else. So how can you show that, no, you stand out? And it's requiring you to have stories of difficult problems you've solved. And when you're applying, you need to capture them in a very, very, very tight space. So let's do that. Your job is to convert the reality into perception and to ensure also that they know that you are dedicated, that you care. So it all comes down to building your flashcard. For every company you apply to, you want to have your flashcard. Your flashcard is nothing revolutionary, people. I guess I can sort of say it's revolutionary. I mean, it is kind of important, but it is revolutionary. It is not. It's not nothing. For every company, you want to have your flashcard when you apply. On one side, you want things. Well, let's say companies hire for 2 things: you being good, your value, and you caring about bringing your value to them. So your value and your care. Your effectiveness in the job is a function of your value and your dedication. Your value alone is not enough. Your dedication is not enough. Your value and your dedication is multiplied by each other, gives the value to the company. right? It's value, your value is not automatically translated into value for the company. It's multiplied by your care. So you need to show them that at every stage of the application, your value and your care. It's the two sides of the flashcard. You can't tell them that you're a high value engineer. You can't really even tell them I've solved difficult problems, or you can't tell them I have 4+ years experience. Like maybe you can say it, but it's not very useful. And you definitely can't tell them I'm a passionate, I really care about the problems you're solving. Like it doesn't work. People are just like, show me. If anything, it can sometimes be a bit concerning. It's like, whoa, why are you saying so? You protest too much type thing. So you got to show them. So when you are in the final round, much easier. But you've got to show, not tell them with your flashcard. You've got to show your value, evidence of your experience. Doesn't matter how many years, just experience of the 5 things that make a great software engineer. Your problem solving and technical communication being the 2 most important. Give them easy, especially when you apply, easy to digest evidence that you've solved difficult engineering problems and that you are experienced at explaining difficult engineering stuff. And the other side, show that you care. And the most direct way to show you care is a genuine interest in the engineering at their company. And that's, again, you can't just say, I'm genuinely interested. You have to show it, which is going to turn out to require different things at different stages, but especially when you apply something that shows them you care, requires them to be able to ascertain, interpret in 2 seconds that you have put some effort in. We'll talk about how you can do that in a second. Both sides is what makes you effective for them. I will say you can show you care through some of the most problematic things in American society and British society. And by the way, someone mentioned it, I do live in the US. I am technically in the UK right now, but I do live in the US. But both societies and many societies, but particularly in America and the UK, there is a way of showing you care that is a shorthand that if you get it locked down when you're 18 years old, you have for the rest of your life. And that is getting selected for one of the elite institutions. Because if you have that on your resume for the rest of your life, people will interpret not only your value, but also that you care. The interpretation being there's no way you could have got into Princeton if you were not a hardworking, dedicated person. Is that true? Probably. Is it true that the vast majority of hardworking, dedicated people did not go to Princeton? You bet it is. So the problem is that is the shorthand for showing you care for the rest of your career. And that is no good. That's not very fair. And so the point of Codesmith and the point of this workshop being free, and Codesmith is really just doing this entire workshop over a series of months and all the pieces that go into it, being kind of handheld through or guided through, not handheld, guided through. But that's why I give it for free, because I think it's the principled thing. The point of this is to find ways at every stage of the company application process to show your value and that you care. Remember, your value to them is value you have multiplied by care that you have, whether or not you went to Princeton at 18, Princeton or Harvard or whatever, Stanford or whatever, U Michigan, whatever, there's many great schools, but whether or not you went, and because it is of course a great sign, but there's many people who are exceptional who didn't have those things. And okay, flashcard, how long you got? Well, when you first apply, they're looking for 2 seconds. And on site, they're looking for 5 hours. You can imagine which one's harder to convince if you're genuinely a good quality engineer who cares. It's going to be the 2 seconds one. So let's talk about how you can do it at each stage. So, and we're going to dwell on the hardest bits. So at each stage, let's keep it simple. There's application, there's phone screen, and there's on-site. Oh, goodness me. Long day. Yesterday was tax filing day. Okay, so when you apply value, care, or you might call it on you, on them. So your value, you need probably only two little references to things that they can instantly interpret as being evidence that is not BS, but is really specific, specific of your core 5 things that matter to be a good engineer. Let's just focus on 2 of them. Evidence of solving difficult problems and evidence of good technical communication. It actually means that in theory, you could just have one thing, because if it's evidence of solving a difficult problem and you explain it really well, you're kind of showing both, right? But you can also try and do separately. It's why Codesmith grads lean so heavily on their open source work. It's why they say, hey, I've built this uh, performance monitoring tool for the gRPC protocol, and actually spoke on it at Google. So that would be someone like Kenny, who's a grad of last year, who spoke at Google at the gRPC conference about the monitoring tool that he and his crew within the program built. That instantly difficult problem. GRC, well, maybe a good explanation. gRPC monitoring tool for the new protocol, the recently developed protocol, to improve developer experience. Difficult problem, unambiguous, easy to recognize, difficult within 2 seconds. And gave a talk on it at Google. Committed communicator of difficult technical stuff to others. You want, when you apply, that they have seen that side of your flashcard in what you wrote. Now, you might have had that in your resume, on the top of the resume. You might have put it in a message, but you want to have that show up somehow. The bit that you can't get in a resume, and therefore is one of the reasons it's nice to be able to write some sort of message or reach out in some way, is the bit that you show you care. Now, that might be by going for coffee with someone who works at the company. That might be by, in theory, deeply nurturing in a passionate manner the relationship with a recruiter. Maybe they're not always the biggest stakeholder or decision maker, but maybe. It may be by just applying and having a message that shows you care. Whatever it is, the problem with doing the networking or other is they do show you care. The problem is it's really hard. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, because the point of showing you care is doing hard stuff. That's what shows you care. But is there something a little bit more approachable? Certainly, I can only ever stress that networking is the secret to professional growth. Like, without a doubt. My even Codesmith exists because I was working for the brief 11 months straight out of college at a consulting firm that I really, really hated working at. And I reached out to various venture capital firms and got coffee chats. And one of them said, "Hey, you want to help set up this venture?" Turned I wasn't very good at that either, but anyway. But the person who was setting it up with me, or was setting it up mainly, introduced me to the person who initially gave a little bit of money to Codesmith before taking it out, but got us off the ground a few years later. So everything comes from connecting with other people. That's like, but you got a lot to worry about in your job search as it is, without having to heavily network. Of course, if you have that, oh my God, there's nothing more powerful. But you can also at least include in your strategy plenty of applications where there's no networking, but you nevertheless still show your value. That's fine, but also that you care. And remember, your value to the company is your value multiplied by how much you care. So how do you show your care relatively efficiently? Well, it's this. It's the ability to have found something about the company or engineering leadership that evidentially, unambiguously took some effort. Effort that then becomes evidence to the company that you must care. And you know what? Bots don't care. Bots don't care. So this is evidence also that you're real. And the effort that it takes to do these, I think, actually is sufficient, that it's kind of like a little bit of a moral thing when you show it. You're not BSing, it's actually quite substantive. So it's finding something about the company, something about the engineering of the company that is not easy to find. It is not on their job description. It is not, I saw that you use React. It's not even, I saw that you spoke in your job description to XYZ. What's wild, people, is if you find the very same thing that's on the job description, but you find it somewhere else, let's say on the VP of Engineering's LinkedIn, suddenly it becomes evidence you care because you didn't find it in the JD that was part of the application page. Even if you took the exact same phrase, I saw on your VP of Engineering's post about the role on LinkedIn a mention about really emphasizing the importance of product-oriented engineers. I thought that was great to read from them. But it's the same thing that's on the job description, but you found it on the VP of Engineering's page. Instantly, it's become evidence that you care because people are both really not very smart, including myself, and also incredibly intuitive. And one of the things we're incredibly good at as humans is recognizing and interpreting the value, the effort, or the value from the effort. We are incredibly good at working out and quickly interpreting, especially if we're hiring people or managing a process or whatever, and interpreting quickly who is worth our time. Is it an evolution? I don't know. It's like it's the fast and slow thinking. It's some damn fast thinking. We are amazing. Are we bad at it? Well, actually, what's funny is the studies show that we're actually pretty good at it. In this case, this is the question of, did this person bother? And when they see a quick mention of something that's beyond, they may not even realize. They might be like, oh yeah, I'm really glad they put that extra effort in. But they just know this person's application is worth more time because they can tell that you cared, you tried, and that is worth everything. Okay, so we'll talk about how to do that in a second. Phone screen, the flashcard gets longer. Now you've got more stuff about your value. You're preparing your you're preparing short anecdotes, stories about how you solved interesting engineering problems. And actually, you're answering any question that's about, tell me your experience with, not with a direct answer. Of course, it's a direct answer. It's more just like, I don't even know what you say. Like, what's your experience with Node? What they're really asking is, tell me the problems you've solved in the back end where maybe Node has been the answer. It's also why you can say, when they say, tell me your experience with Node, and you haven't worked with Node, or your backend work's been with Java, you're not getting the wrong answer by saying, well, actually, when I'm thinking about my backend runtime, I've mostly used Java, but here are the things I'm prioritizing. And hopefully you've got some ability to compare with Node. You saw that they use Node, and so you went and read up on the key differences. But you're saying, yeah, when I'm thinking about my backend choices, and your Node is obviously one of them, I tend to prioritize these three things. One, I don't know, a data model that corresponds reasonably well with, or I don't know, an integrated development environment between the view, the data model, and maybe I don't know, some sort of controlling code. And actually, that's led me typically to use Java. My understanding is that within the web environment, Node makes more sense because at that point you're dealing primarily with requests and responses that are happening with maybe long wait time between what's being displayed to the user and the server, and so that kind of asynchronous request response function call is quite suitable for that environment. You see what I'm going here? Like, your experience with Node is how you make engineering choices about when to use Node or something else. So once you're on the phone screen, on your value becomes well-practiced, well-versed explanations of choices you've made with key technologies. And then you're on your value, your care. Well, for one thing, you're starting to just show it by talking, by caring in the way you speak, but also, and your energy. That's where all the things about energy and passion and engagement, but also you're starting to do it by, firstly, you're bringing up any insights that you got from your research before the interview. And you're sharing, oh, actually, I saw the VP of engineering talking about this prioritization of product-oriented engineers on their LinkedIn. Very cool to read. And the recruiter's going, or even the first round engineer is going, oh yeah, no, that's yeah. And then you're asking questions where you're showing you care. So I've really enjoyed mentoring other engineers. How does that process work? What are the opportunities like for that in the company? And the recruiter or the first round engineer is like, oh, not really sure, but you should talk to the engineers about that. Oh, fantastic. Love to. Looking forward to it. See you at the on-site. Right? So you're showing again both sides, your care and your value. And the on-site, obviously, this becomes really, you're showing your value by doing the job. With all the downsides of software engineering interviewing, and certainly it's fair to say that algorithms on the whiteboard are an ambiguously valuable measure of your problem solving. There are plenty of on-site interviews where you might literally be asked to debug a code base, write a feature live, talk through a take home you did, and explain your choices. That is the job. Like that's a job you'll do. I know people hate software engineering, but it's like that Winston Churchill, that apocryphal quote, democracy is the worst form of government besides all the others. Software engineering is the worst interviewing besides all the others. When you're interviewing for business development, the interview is talking about it. You only really reach the phone screen stage. Sorry. You only reach the phone screen stage, like telling stories about it. When you on-site with a BD thing or with a finance thing, you're still just doing storytelling, which you might say is a good proxy for business development ability. It is, but it ain't doing business development. Whereas in the on-site of software engineering, you roughly are doing the job. You're debugging a code base. You're walking through engineering the choices you've made. It's not great, but it's not bad. And then on them showing your care, it's thoughtful comments, thoughtful questions, and it's of course the 3-4 hours you're spending working hard on their problems. So implicitly, you care. So showing your care and showing your value, which multiplied together is your value to them, is really, really hard when they're spending 3 seconds at the start. The conversion rate's incredibly low. The more you can show both sides of the flashcard, the higher your conversion rate, but it's time consuming and you've got to balance. Just like if you quick apply on LinkedIn, you're showing none of your care, but you might be showing your value. And if your value is really high, they might still go, oh, it's enough value, I'm going to interview them. But it's a trade-off. If you're spending time showing both sides that you care and you value, you're valuable, it takes more time, but you might get a higher conversion, you will get a higher conversion rate. At phone screen and then on site, you get more and more time to show both sides of the flashcard. It gets longer and longer on both sides until you've shown that full picture and you get that offer. Let's dwell for a second on the when you apply bit. What can you do, as I say, to show you care? Well, one is finding some sort of engineering output from the firm that you're applying to and saying something about it that shows a little bit of care. Even just saying, I think it's a really cool piece. It's better than nothing because they know it wasn't easy to find that. They know that it's emotionally quite hard to do that bit of vulnerable, putting yourself out there. And so when they see you say, hey, so here's an example, a great blog post by Riot about fixing their bugs and how they approach their bug patching process. You might literally just say, love seeing that you're solving bugs in public. Great learning material. Instantly, you've shown a bit of care. The other approach, as I say, is to find someone in leadership and their LinkedIn or even somebody in the more early career. If they're in leadership, you could even refer to them by name. I saw Joe. They are the engineering manager, and I saw them share their commitment to staying on the ground, coding, while also leading overall architectural choices. I thought that was a really cool balance. You might mention them by name. If it's someone more early career, you might just be saying, look at what they've done and say, I did get to read up on a few profiles before I applied, and I saw some great stuff about how the team is approaching technical debt. They spoke about, rolling off Angular and into React. I thought that was really interesting to see. No names, but just, stuff you clearly got off their LinkedIn profiles. Showing that care because the time it took you to find that is more care than 99% of applicants ever put in, and certainly more care than a bot puts in. And you're being hired for your value to the company, which is your value multiplied by your care. If your value's sky high, you can get away with not showing care. Even then, I don't know. You need a bit of care. But it's true, you can get away with some not showing care. If you're in a hot market, you can definitely get away with not showing too much care. If you're just showing care and you're not signaling your value, no one's hiring for sympathy, unfortunately. No one's hiring to give you a shot. I mean, that's just not, unfortunately, how it goes. You've got to show both sides. It starts off hard. It gets much, much easier. I don't consider this to be a hack, this when you apply showing care by that little bit of extra, research, whatever, because I know how hard it is. I have to do my own cold outreach, and my goodness, it's emotionally effortful thing. What I do is I print out information on the person, whatever, and then I lock down my computer with this app called Cold Turkey Writer that locks down access to any other apps, and I write my messages because it's bizarrely draining to write a message that mentions something personal about a person or a company. But they know that. And that's why they know that you doing it shows you care. And if they also know that you're valuable and you care, that's what they're looking for. That's what they're hiring for. Okay, there we go, people. So just, to summarize, we have, and we're going to come to other questions. I will stop fairly soon, though, because it's getting quite late. What makes a great engineer is the experience with those things that they value, all 5 of them, which includes your knowledge of the tools and tech, but is primarily above all these 2 at the top, but it includes all of them. You can do it anywhere now. Your why matters. It's partly what will show that you care and push you through how bloody hard it is to care. You then, to get paid, need to convert that value you have into the perception from them. And your value is only half the story. Your value to them, and therefore the perception they have of your value, will be a combination of your value, that is the things that, your capacity as an engineer, and multiplied by how much you care. And you've got to show both. It starts off an absolute pain in the ass. High loss factor. That means a lot of your applications don't even get seen. Therefore, do everything you can to optimize. If that means you submit 1,000 applications with no message and therefore no way of showing you care, you're just showing your value by your resume, I guess. But 5 of them convert. That's a 0.5% conversion rate, but you got 5 phone screens off it. Maybe that's okay if it took you 5% of the time that it would have taken to write careful messages that show that you have value and that you care. But calibrate. As you go through the process, it becomes ever more important to be showing both sides your value as an engineer and that you care, until the final round, where you should have a long ass list of things that you've shown them are your value and your dedication to them, and that is what gets you hired. Okay, so let's see if we have. Looks like Alex has been answering questions in here as well. Oh, S Fenton here is spot on. By the way, one of the things I love about ChatGPT is it's shown how much it's really about care, because you can now auto-generate your, letter to them, and that doesn't work. I actually think that much of what made letters that used to be just matching your experience to their job description, what made those convincing was not the matching, because technology matters. It's not really. It was the effort it took to write those matches up, and a reasonable recruiter could go, bloody hell, not only they got good value, but they did all this matching for me in this letter. And that's what they were really hiring for, is that effort. Once there's a one-click solution for that, much of its value is completely evaporated. And now you have to show you care in a different way. And that's why you see, for one, hey, you want to know people? That's why you see social becoming a mega part of Korea. It's why you see social becoming a mega part of Korea. Because social, engaging online as a real, person on Twitter or whatever, LinkedIn, whatever, increasingly is a show of dedication. It's really hard for a lot of people, and it's a show of dedication. And increasingly, that's why highly ambitious people do it. If you look at now a Stanford grad going into venture capital, they will have an engaged Twitter account. That is nuts. But they have it because it shows in a setting that others can see your dedication and commitment to doing hard stuff, which gets you stuff. These are the subtle pieces. Samaya says, I'm a mid, but you don't need to do that per se yet as a software engineer. I think you can do it on a case-by-case basis. And in terms of optimizing how to split your time, and the cover letter should be super tight, 120 words. I don't know how you should choose. Probably ones where you have some good material, do it, and ones where it's really hard to find material, more you can do, the better. I'm worried about soon when we'll be able to automate the personal message with an actual signal of care, then we'll really have to look for another. Right now, it's pretty hard with the right, Bing Copilot. You might be able to get something specific about the company. It's still quite hard to write in a way that suggests actual care. So it's not really there yet. But once you can, that won't work anymore. But we're not quite there yet. You won't be, then, because humans need to be able to filter effort. Recruiters need to be able to filter value and care, because they know what they're hiring for, equally important. If they can't see care in application, what do they do? Like, they're screwed. They have to have a way of evaluating you on the two sides of what makes them hire you, because both are equally important for your value to them, your value and how much you care. And they're both important, equally important. If they can't see how much you care because there's no way of distinguishing the effort that went into your application from a bot, what are they going to do? Well, humans are incredibly good at coming up with new ways. We'll come up with new ways to show the care. People think maybe video, like a little Loom video. I don't know. I don't think so. It doesn't. I never. I don't know. But that's what they're solving for. Loom videos are solving for that. Okay. Samaya says mid-level developer, France. When we ask questions about senior developer who has 25 years experience, it's not appreciated because it's seen as lack of autonomy. Well, I mean, that's not a Samaya, not a. I doesn't sound like an ideal senior developer. They should perhaps be really excited to share their knowledge, but yes, autonomy is that key feature, isn't it? Thea asked mid-level junior roles. I'm seeing exclusively senior plus. I think firstly, look around. There are more than you might think. A lot more. I mean, if we look at the last, let me just even pull up the last. Let's pull up the last. I don't know, 20 offers here. How many offers is this? 20, 17 here. So over the last 2 weeks. Let me look at the titles. Hold on. Am I screen sharing? Hopefully not. Yeah, of course, thank God. Let me try to find the titles here. Sorry. Yeah, here we go. So software engineer, Athena Health, React software engineer, Iris, senior backend, Capital One, software engineer, McGraw-Hill, actuarial developer. You see what I'm saying, people? Actuarial developer. The worlds are changing, folk. Like everything's something engineer. McGraw-Hill software engineer 2, that's not senior. Deployed engineer, Codeware software engineer, WorldPay, technical support engineer, Amelia AI, cognitive engineer. It's another AI engineer. So there's a lot more. I mean, the one thing maybe look a bit adjacent. So if I'm looking at the last, actually 32 offers, I'm only seeing 2 3 maybe senior. So I would just keep searching. Thea, I hate to be so well. Alex, yeah, Alex says title creep. Exactly. Yeah, Alex's first job was 10 years experience. Yeah, and they've obviously thrived in that. So yeah, I'll leave Alex. Alex has a better answer than me. Let me just put my LinkedIn again here for people who have to jump off, so you can feel free. If you want feedback on your LinkedIn, give me a message, just in case you're giving any signals that don't show your value right up front. The care bit is hard to show, right? You can't show care in a custom manner in a LinkedIn profile, but you can show your value, and you might be not showing your value. There are easy ways. Unfortunately, there are all sorts of things that unfairly signal low value as an engineer that you don't want to do. Unfortunately, LinkedIn created an absolute nightmare with its open to work banner. It's unfortunately not these are very unfair things, but these are the subtleties. As Fenton says, stories about problems you solved. Yeah, interesting experience has been a while and it's become a bit hard to remember the details. Do you know how to recover that detail? Yeah. It's not an unreasonable question. It really isn't, right? I would just personally, and I know you've had to jump off, but I know you say you get the YouTube clip here. I would personally, firstly, go back to the code base and I would try and talk through it line by line. That's what I'd really do. I mean, even, just explain it to ChatGPT line by line, and then even put the code in and say, is this roughly describing what I'm doing? Saint Laurent says, for the problem solving, should we have to explain the details of how you solved them? Yes, yes, for sure, but doing so in a way that, and this is why it's a practice thing. And you could say, oh, some people are really good at it. You know who's really good at it, by the way, consistently, is the people who go to Codesmith who are just like naturally good at it. Well, of course, they're not naturally. There's probably some predisposition. That's why they went into the field. But the people who are naturally good at it are the teachers. Particularly it doesn't really matter. I was going to say particularly like the physics teachers. They are exceptional. But actually just the teachers in general, the people who did teaching pre-Codesmith. And I low-key love that. My parents are both teachers, and maybe they even suggested to me, don't go into teaching kind of thing. My sister did, but because it is really rubbish in that it can be really rubbish in that it's not a lot of giving. These teachers of I think about someone who became a Google lead, Dan King, who's like a super senior at Google now, went to Codesmith, was an AP physics teacher at Lennox in LA. And it's a lot of giving, and then it's for when do you get your payback? And it's a lot of giving for a lot of years. And I'm not saying it's about money payback, but it's I'm not saying we all want to work hard now to get to be resting later, but there's a little bit of I get to delegate a bit in theory, right? I think you should stay on the ground, but delegate a bit. Teachers, a good administration maybe, but ultimately an on the ground teacher is doing this. I love that they can do that for 5, 6, 7 years, and then it makes them better as a software engineer, where they're going to, yes, get a bit more of a kind of breath, and then they can mentor others. So it's a practice skill, ability to explain the details. That's what I mean by technical communication. How do you practice that? Well, obviously, pitching Codesmith here, that's the essence of the program. But you can do so in every other way. You can do so, as I say, by explaining it using ChatGPT's new voice features and saying, hey, how's that as an explanation? These are the sort of things you certainly can do. We've actually thought about building a tool that gives feedback on technical communication kind of automatically, but how detailed should you go? Well, one thing I'd always stress, Saint Laurent would be that you ensure the advice the explanations you're giving are suitably in a way technology generic. So you're naming, GraphQL. They're asking you, tell me your experience with GraphQL. Tell me the story of how you solved the problem. But you're then genericizing as you go. So you're saying, yeah, well, we were building out I don't know, internal dashboard for performance metrics of our I don't know, site our site throughput or our server throughput in some cluster of servers. And we were building a dashboard that was only going to be used internally. So we decided to actually test out GraphQL. We were more of a kind of experiment for using Graph. The problem, I'm done. But you want to speak to both the specific terms, GraphQL or APIs, or no, that's generic already, but GraphQL. But you would also want to speak to this in a broader context, especially for people earlier in the process, like a recruiter. So it would be saying, we chose to use GraphQL as our I don't know uh, uh, querying or API design. We chose to use GraphQL as our kind of API structure, our request structure. I'm really as our structure for integrating the dashboard with the API endpoints. We chose to use GraphQL, but really we could have used a number of different approaches, but we were thinking about how to surface, how to give as much control to us as the dashboard creators in accessing as precise data as possible without requiring a ton of support, in this case from the engineers maintaining the actual clusters, and therefore the ability to do much of the API work or much of the kind of data querying refined work as the dashboard developers was super valuable. So sorry, Saint Laurent, I'm just a bit tired, but my point there, if it's getting across, is both describing the specific technology, how you solved with it, and also trying to genericize it enough such that it's a story that people can go, oh, okay, well, we're not using GraphQL, but I understand the problem you were solving was one of giving the developers on the dashboard side as much freedom as possible to not depend on the developers on the server side. And that's that's what I was trying to get at there, was genericizing the problem. It's a problem of collaboration within a team. Okay, hopefully that was somewhat in the right direction. Feargal says, oh, interesting. 2-hour job search, which suggests the opposite. That's good, Feargal. Hey, there's nothing like hacking care. I mean, to be fair, that's what we're always trying to do as humans. Human life is about leveraging care that we do have to get as high a return as possible for that care, because care is emotionally incredibly exhausting. Life and capitalism, and I'm not saying this is capitalism is bad capitalism. I'm just saying, capitalism, that is a society that is driven by some degree of, I don't know, what is it? Maximizing return on investment, is about leverage. That's saying we put X amount of effort, which might be human capital and therefore care, into getting as high a return as possible. So sure, if you can be as optimal as possible in showing that care, yeah, that's the arbitraging how much effort I put in with how much people perceive it is a vital part. Now, what I can convince is that leaders, as a side note, by the way, is that leaders desperately need to minimize that arbitrage. That's showing you do not want to spend your whole life branding a little bit of care as, oh, I care so much, because people are really damn good at calling that out, and they should be. But especially when you're getting in, yeah, optimize leveraging the care you have, because you only got so much, to get as much return as possible for that. In which case, I don't know if 2-hour job search is the way to do that, but like that's, if there are efforts you can take to leverage your care as high as possible, you bet. It's no problem when you're coming up. Once you're a leader, it's the opposite. You need to under-leverage your care because you need to show you got to do the hard stuff and not be branding a little bit of care as though it's, God's gift. And that's something that leaders often fall into the trap of. But when you're coming up, absolutely go for it. Thanks, Alfina. All right. That's it, people. Thanks, Josiah. Thanks, Laurent, Majid. Thanks, David. Lovely to have you on. Ashay. Yeah, there's Josiah. Help me out. Is it Josiah or oh, it's horrible. I don't. It's a lovely name, but I don't actually recognize. Hosea. I don't know what's going on with my pronunciation. And yeah. Anyway,
It's Josiah. Thanks.
Josiah. I don't think I got in all the tries. I don't think I got that.
They're all close.
By the way, Nelson, message me if the hard parts teaching's not where it needs to be. I want to know.
It is nowhere near a will. It's like 15% of a will.
See, that's not a credible view. I don't know. I actually really would message me, directly if like you have any genuine thoughts on that, because I have been thinking about I know
I
you're
mean,
being nice there,
They're not
but-
horrible, but like will is like just
all right. See, now you're just turning. Yeah, okay, all right. Thanks, Nelson. That was not what I was looking for, but all right, good. Never, I'm teasing, but yes. All right, Susie. Thank you to my fellow ginger. There we go. Thank you, everybody. You've got my LinkedIn there. Please do DM. That's my Twitter. And then I guess, if you want to email, you certainly can. If you want to get into the CSX Slack, where you can also DM me, but if you're not active in it, like, you might not be in it, right? But if you want to join the CSX Slack, that's the Codesmith kind of prep community Slack, you can also DM me under Will there. And then the big thing is, people, we have a bunch of phenomenal Meta, that's Facebook, right? Google and Amazon recruiters who work with us, who help you prepare to get into Codesmith. They're kind of your advocates in the admissions process, help you, get the technical interview prep you need for the program. If any of you want to connect with any of them, they're very happy to do so. They don't obviously get you into the program. That's the admissions process that you have to pass, but they can help you prepare for it. Yeah, but just remember the program, while it has scholarships, does cost $20,000 plus. So, which is obviously, good investment, but one that is a very serious thing to think through. Thank you, everybody. Also, David, I love your background. That's a true, I can only imagine, serious product lead or maybe engineering lead behind there, but behind that great background. But that's it, people. Good night.